Welcome everybody to the first episode of Hall's Garage. Today I have my personal vehicle. This is a 2017 Mazda 3 and we are going to be doing brake pads and rotors on all four wheels. So this video format is probably going to be a little more lax than following videos on this channel. I do have another YouTube channel where I do things somewhat professionally but also not really. But I don't have a tripod, so I got my lovely fiance wielding the camera today. But yeah, so we're going to start up here on the front just because this is the bit that I have space to work in. And then once the brake pads and rotors are done up here, I'm going to spin the car around and back it in. Chock wheels, obviously, as you do. And do the rears. Alright, so we got the car up in the air on jack stands, and then we got it chocked in the rear. I'm going to take my dad's lovely Milwaukee M18 impact gun and zip all these lug nuts off real quick. To prevent them from getting stuck in the socket, I'm going to leave a couple threads on and then just take them off by hand at the end. But yeah, let's get started so we can get onto these brake calipers. Alright, got all the lug nuts off. Just going to set that on the front bumper. Alright, so here's what we're dealing with. They do not come red from the factory. I painted this because, yup. We got one brake pad here, we got one on the other side of the rotor. This is your rotor, which mine, I don't think I replaced them the last time I did brakes, so it's got a pretty substantial lip, especially in the rear. But yeah, so there's two 14mm bolts, one up here and one down here on the bottom. I'm going to pop these out, and this center section of the caliper will just slide right off the rotor. This is going to be a little bit of a, here's one I prepared earlier moment. I definitely didn't take this caliper off earlier, thinking I needed to take off the whole bracket. Fought with the 17 mils that are on the caliper bracket to take them off, to go to take the bracket and caliper off, and realized that's not how you do that. Anyway, there's one bolt. You don't have to take them all the way out with a wrench. You can just, you know, start them, and then mine come out by hand. So I'm going to take my super fancy $300 caliper holder upper, otherwise known as a wire coat hanger. String that through there, and there we go. There's the caliper. So I'm just going to string this through my holder. I'm going to use the other side because the other side is going to be a bit easier. And then I got to figure out how to string this up so I don't twist the brake line and keep it out of my way. So, or you could just do that. All right, here's a brake pad. Sometimes they just come off. Sometimes they need force. Holy cow, these things needed to be replaced. There's one. I'll grab a new one so I can compare it, but I'm going to put this in the back right now so I remember that that's the rear one. The front one doesn't look terrible. Nope, yep, that's way overdue. This is fine. Actually, no, it still has a little bit of there's this, I think this is a wear indicator. There's this notch here. It'll be more evident on the newer one. But those are the brake pads. And now that I say that I was an idiot and took off the caliper bracket earlier, I'm now looking at this and realizing I need to take off the caliper bracket again. So, 17mm bolts. I'd blame the last mechanic that did this because they were on super tight, but the last mechanic that did it was me. So, alright, here we go. I wonder if I should repaint these. That's going to take a while. Maybe I won't do that. Alright. Now that I'm covered in brake dust, here's the caliper bracket, and here's the second 17mm bolt. And with that off, that means that the rotor should come right off. But it does not want to. What the hell? Why? What are you... Well... Excuse me. Hello, yes? You are designed to come off. Real easy. Alright, so here's the new pads. I think these are the fronts. They would appear to be. So I'll use the rear one as a demo because, yeah, so this is a new pad. As you can see, it's very nice and thick, and that's good. That's what you want. That means that all this material can wear down and stop your car. This is a used brake pad. When you start getting to this point, this is when you start getting to problems. A little bit past this, I would have started hitting the squealers, which is when you hit your brakes and you hear a really, really loud squeak. That's bad. That means that your brakes are either metal on metal or you're hitting the squealer, which means they're about to be metal on metal. And if your brakes are metal on metal, then it becomes a just doing pads and maybe doing rotors to a you're definitely doing rotors. But yeah, so new pads. Got two of these out here. One box has both right and left. So they're identical pads. One's going to go on the front side of the rotor and one's going to go on the rear side of the rotor. But to do that, I need my rotor. By the way, if you're curious as to what all this costs, for the parts that I got, which are I believe it's the card. I asked for the gold series, but it says CarQuest Premium, so that it was $400 for the front rotors, rear rotors, front pads, and rear pads, which is a lot of money. But as I'm learning, it's a lot cheaper than going to a shop. So I'm glad I've been doing this my whole life. So here's the new rotor. I am going to wash this down with some brake clean. I'm not sure if it's true, but I've heard that when you buy new rotors, they come with a oil coating. Actually, I can see it on here. So yeah, they do come with an oil coating. That is meant to protect them while they're in storage, so they do not corrode. I don't think it would make too much of a difference if you just slapped these on here and didn't wipe it off. But theoretically, that oil will plug up your brake pads and limit your stopping power. But to me, that argument seems a little weird because it's a brake pad, it's a consumable product. The layer of carbon ceramic in this case that's going to get filled with that oil is just going to get worn off within, I don't know, maybe 100 miles of braking. I'm not sure, but I'm also not I'm not a trade mechanic. I'm just a guy who does this in my dad's garage. So, all right, so rotor's on. So I'm going to go pry the old clips and brackets off of the caliper bracket here, and we're going to put on the new ones. All right, so I just pried these guys off. They're fun. And then I cleaned the locations where they go with this little brass brush. So I'm going to grab out 4 of these replacement clips. I've got some white lithium grease here. Again, I am in no way a certified mechanic. I am just doing brakes to save $300. Okay, so I just put some grease on that, and then now I'm going to slide these new clips into place correctly. These are always a fun time to try to install. Alright, there's 2. That is the wrong part. You do have to make sure that the rounded bit on here is facing outward. Otherwise, it's not correct. Okay, so that is those installed. And again, I'm sure the way that I do it is different from the way that most people do it, and somebody in the comments will be like, oh yeah, no, you're doing it completely wrong. And you know what? Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it. This is the way I'm doing it. I haven't died yet. Anyway, that is the caliper bracket done. So now I have to prep the pads, reinstall the caliper bracket, and put the caliper and the new pads back on. So I got the caliper bracket back on. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on those clamps I just installed. Alright, so to prep the brake pads, you can see here that the old ones have this little clip on it, and the new ones do not. So I'm going to take the clips that come with it, I'm going to figure out how they actually attach like so. And then this is what makes your pads sided, I guess. So these go towards the top, so they clip on, and then you can, in theory, slide your caliper or your brake pad into place. And this one's going to be stubborn. Rude. There we go. Alright, and I'm going to do the rear. I'm doing my best to remove my elaborate hanging device. I did eventually get this thing figured out. For how much money I paid for it, I thought it would be more intuitive. So, one of the things that you do have to do is you have to expand this caliper, or depress this caliper. So you don't do that by saying mean things and being rude to it. What you need to do is you can either use a C-clamp, or you can get this little handy-dandy tool. I believe I got this thing off of Amazon. And what it is it's a caliper compressor. So you can set your direction with this little ratchet thing. I'm just going to open it up so that it fits roughly. I'm going to open it up too wide so that I can undo and demonstrate the ratcheting feature. And eventually this will, there we go, this will just slide in. And then I'm going to set it to expand. And once it gets to the point where it can actually, do its job, it will start, it'll start doing the thing. Alright, there we go. I got it to bite. Alright, so I've got it expanded to as big as it will, or as much as it will let me compress it. And again, you can do that with a C-clamp. But now that I have that compressed, it will slide right over our new pads that are much thicker, which is why you need to compress it, because the piston is set for the thinner pads. So there's these pins up top that house those 14mm bolts are a little stubborn at times. You got to pull them in a little bit to get them to fit over. But once you have that, I've got one hand holding the caliper. I'm going to thread my top bolt here. Top 14mm, that's threading, so while it's loose, that way I can pivot the bottom. I'm going to line up the bottom and get that to start threading. And then I'm going to set these finger tight for right now. I did the same thing with the 17. But rather than just zapping this thing on with an impact gun, I'm going to go take a look up and see if I can find the torque specs for this and torque them to spec. Alright, so I just looked it up, and the answer is all of them, apparently. I don't know. Best I could find, I'm going to do 55 for the bracket to, I believe this is the hub. And I'm going to do 20 or 240 inch-pounds from the caliper to the bracket. So it doesn't really matter, I guess, which one you start on. So I'll do this first because it was in my hand. I do not have slide grease for this thing. That feels wrong. This torque wrench is a little out of cal, but I'm just going to try and use my better judgment for a torque spec because this doesn't want to click. And now I have to fit this gigantic thing under here somehow. I vaguely remember doing these to like 70 foot-pounds or something like that. but I don't know. That's a big number. But that could also be why it was such a pain in the neck to take them off. Alright. We got clickages. Sweet. Alright, this is ready for the wheel, so I'm going to slap the wheel on here. I'm going to go do the other side, flip the car around, and I will see you again for the backs. Alright, so now for the bit that most of you are probably watching this for. This lovely gadget right here. Man, I wish I had one of these. But anyway, so disengaging, or rather putting the electric parking brake into service mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the car into accessory mode. So we get all the things. Also, that's, yep. I'm going to push the gas all the way to the floor. Press and hold down the parking brake. It did release. I'm going to then turn off the car and turn it back on. Let's see if I can do this while holding you guys. So car off, ignition back on. And right there, it hit the end of its stroke. The motor was just unwinding, and I get this little parking indicator indicating that my parking brake, can't really see it. It's a P inside of the little wheel with the parentheses around it. But that indicates that the parking brake is now in service mode. So I can now compress the rear calipers to put on the new brake pads like I was showing you without damaging the motor that controls the emergency brake. So here's what we're looking at in the rears. As you can see, the rotors are a lot smaller. This is the pad on the outside, and then there's an inner pad again, as per usual. Here's your caliper bracket. This is your electric parking brake motor. As you can see, there's a little bit of overspray on it. This is the plug that runs it, but this is the thing that we had to disengage or put into service mode in order to be able to compress this caliper, because otherwise you're fighting this motor, and that's not what you want, obviously. So, same as on the front. I need to double check the bolt sizes. But I'll take off the caliper, I'll take off the caliper bracket, and then I will do the rotors and pads. So, can confirm, the bolt sizes are different. So, the caliper bracket bolts are now 14 millimeters, and the caliper 2 bracket bolts are 13 mil. Mazda Y. Okay, so let's crack this caliper off. This is not one that I prepared earlier, so we're going to fight through this together. Also, I figured out the reason I couldn't torque the front is because of this thing. I did go back and fix it. So it is now torqued to 20 foot-pounds. My goodness. Alright, that's 113. Usually you don't have to, yeah, like that was super easy. Usually you don't have to hold the pin when you try and take the caliper off. I don't know why I had to do that this time. I'm going to attempt to disconnect the parking brake connector. There we go. Just to give me a little bit more wiggle room. There we go. Caliper and e-brake assembly has been removed. So now I get to take a crack at taking this caliper bracket off. And if I was smart, because they're smaller bolts, I would have torqued them to less. But when I did these last, I don't think I was that smart. So let's find out. I was not. Come on. Okay. Your rear brakes usually do not need to get changed as much as your fronts, just because your front brakes do 70% of the stopping. And because of that, your rear brakes, the hardware, tends to get a little bit, we'll call it crispier. 1 14 millimeter down. 1 14 millimeter to go. Oh, that was way easier. What the hell? Slow down. Alright. And there we go. There's our caliper bracket and our second 14mm bolt. Let's take a look at these pads here real quick. Again, because your front brakes do 70% of the stopping, your rear brakes are going to be smaller. Yeah, those definitely needed to be replaced. I'll do a new versus old comparison in a second. Let me crack these off. Switch out the... Never mind, there are no clamps for the rears. Sweet. This one was that side, which is the inside. I'm going to try and remember how these are sided. But yeah, so let me switch out, or let me get the new brake pads. We'll compare them to the old ones. I'll put the little clips on if needed, and swap out this rotor. Here's our new pads. They already have the little clips mounted on. Here is a new versus old comparison. Definitely needed to be replaced. So there are two different types of pads. There's one that have these bumps that are far apart. Those go on the back towards the center of the car. And there are ones that have these little bumps near the center, and those go on the front of the car. But before I can do that, I have to get this rotor off. Now I gave this a tug, and it ain't going nowhere. So I got my trusty hammer here. I'm probably going to need something heavier, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to strike this at each of the points between the studs. Obviously try not to hit the studs because that's how you damage threads. But I'm just going to give it a whack a couple times, and hopefully it'll break free any rust on the inside of this drum that's holding the rotor to the hub assembly. So let's give it a shot. It seems to be a firm no. I'm going to play around with this for a little bit and I'll see if I can get this off. I got it. That's the thing we're battling. So the way I did it was I took trusty hammer number 2 here, and I gave it a good old whack from the back. I was laying underneath the center of it, and that's what it took. Woo. Okay. Hopefully that never happens again, but the other side's going to be just as difficult. But we're going to ignore that for right now, and pretend that this one just slid off. And let's put on our new, I say new, it's already dirty because it's been touched by my hands, our new rotor. Also, if you're wondering what the extra threaded holes and maybe the non-threaded holes are for, some cars, like the 2011 Honda Pilot that my mother drives, they have set screws in the rotors. And those are the worst because they never come out. I think the first time we did brakes on that car, it was either the first time or the last time, I don't remember. One of the times that we did brakes on that car, it was heat and hammers and flame and more flame and more flame and more flame, and then it eventually came off. It was bad. Anyway, that's the new rotor. So let's put some grease on this housing. I forgot to wire brush off. Hey, even if it does nothing, at least I'm consistent. Make sure to get all of the brake dust in the grease. It adds some flavor. My mother came out and told me I was having tacos tonight, and sure, we'll find a way to make it work. I might be eating grease, but that's alright. Who doesn't like a little bit of brake dust in their tacos? Wait. So, small dots go in the front. I'm going to try and slide them in from the center of the bracket. I want to see if that works better than sliding them in from the outside of the bracket. Oh, well, I pinched my fingers, but that's in. Okay. The caliper piston has grooves on it that align with the dots. That's why the dots matter. So I got both pads in, and I'm going to space them out so that they slide over the rotor with hopefully minimal issues. Alright, that's one. That's two threading. Okay. Thread these down until they feel like they're binding and being terribly cross-threaded, even though they're not. And then you sit here and you tighten for 18 hours. So, keen-eyed viewers may note in the previous shot, I put the pads on upside down. That's now fixed. Don't do that. Rather, don't let that ride. You can put them on backwards as long as you fix them. But don't drive with that, because that is how you get problems. Alright, so... perfect. That is maximum compression, but it doesn't fit in here. So, I get to show you the C-clamp. So, we got our C-clamp here. And I'm just going to open this up. We got a fan going now. It's like 90 degrees outside. It's probably not, but it feels like it. Alright. I'm going to hook it from the bottom here. If you were to do this correctly, you would go grab that one 2x4 that your parent has been saving since like sometime in the 70s for some reason. And you'd use that, and you'd put that on this piston. And that would allow you to do this correctly, which is to not use the plastic casing that houses the e-brake gearing as your backing plate for your C-clamp, so that when you tighten this down, it doesn't crack the housing. We're going to hope and pray. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten this down, and it should compress the piston just enough to where I can fit the caliper compressor in here. Or, because I'm here and it's not taking a whole lot of force, I could just compress it all the way. That's maximum compression. Slide that over top here. That's our first 13 mil bolt. It's our second 13 millimeter bolt. Still 20 foot-pounds on the caliper 2 bracket bolts. Somebody's out there partying with an LS. I'm going to need a 13 millimeter deep socket to fully torque that one, and we're going to do the bottom. By the way, the reason I'm just using an adjustable wrench instead of, the correct crescent wrench is because I'm lazy. And I didn't feel like finding the one that fit. Let me go get a 13 mil deep socket so I can do the top. Alright, 13 mil deep socket. Let's try this again. Oh hey, what do you know, it fits. And that's 20. Alright. That's good now. And I'm going to do the caliper to, I think it's called a hub. I don't remember. I'm going to do that to, I did the fronts to 55 and they're 17 millimeter bolts. These are 14 millimeter bolts, so I'm going to do them to 45. But I think the torque spec's the same on the front and rear. I'm going to do them to 50 because that feels right. That's 60. Let's not do that. That's how you break things. Top and bottom are torqued. I double checked them with the actual wrench and they do feel about right. So I'm going to start on the other side and throw this wheel back on. I'm torquing the wheels, so I put anti-seize on my studs. So I'm going to be torquing them to 90 foot-pounds just because anti-seize acts sort of like a lubricant. So doing it to 90 foot-pounds because it's a lubricant means you're actually doing it to about 95 in terms of thread stretching. So that's what I'm going to be doing. That's what I did on the fronts. That's what I'm going to do back here. But obviously you can't do it while it's up in the air because, it spins. Additionally, I'm going to plug the emergency brake back in so I have that because that's important because this is a manual. So without that, I just roll. Yep. All right, anyway, tire on. Let's do the other side.
Alright, rear brakes are done. So, a couple things. Oh, let's hop in here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pump the brakes a bunch of times because your foot will go right to the floor while the piston repressurizes. Alright, there we go. I got resistance on the piston. So now to disable the service mode, I'm going to do the same process that we did to enable it, except I'm going to pull up on the emergency brake instead of push down. So I'm going to turn the ignition on here. Going to pull our accelerator all the way to the floor, pull up on the e-brake. Going to turn the ignition off, and then turn the ignition back on. You can hear it winding. Once it's unwinding, you can let everything go. Then I can pull up on the e-brake. Tightens up. I get the light. We're good to go.
So there you have it. That is a full brake job on a 2017 Mazda 3, front and rear, pads and rotors. But yeah, I hope this encourages you guys to try it out at home. It's relatively simple. You don't need any fancy caliper tools. You can just use a C-clamp if you got one. I did need like 3 different wrenches and a couple different torque wrenches, but if you are good with your arm and can feel torques, then go ahead, give it a shot. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. This was the first episode of Paul's Garage, and we'll catch you next time.